and industry partners. We have Dr. Brian Smith from the Brian Lam School of Communication at Purdue University. We have our very own Ganga Dhanesh, soon to be hopefully Assistant Professor of Communication Management in Communication and New Media, and Ryan Lin, who is the Business Director of Blugrapes. So today we are going to talk about what is the intersection of using communication strategically with social media, what are the implications, what are the trends, and what is perhaps some of the points of debate and future directions. So having said that, let me open up the floor. We are going to start with you, Ganga, then go to you, Brian, and then wrap up with you, Ryan.
Sure.
Thank you.
One key word we've been hearing over the last couple of days is social media as a force multiplier. But I'm not really very sure what force we're talking about, right? Positive forces or negative? And probably it's a mix of both, which kind of get unleashed when the two get together. I don't know how many of you know asterisks and obliques. Asterisks and obliques used to be one of my favorite comics when I was young, and it still is. And one of the sounds that you hear is clapped, right? When they get into a fight, they have the fishmonger and the fish flying all over the place. I'm sure all of us, or at least our parents or grandparents, would have experience of such a Gaulish village, which essentially is a small community, right? Where you know the fishmonger who brings your fish, where you know the butcher who cuts your meat, where you know the tailor who stitches your clothes, the milkman, and you also know when the milkman has poured water into your milk, and there is instant feedback, right? So those conversations I'm calling garden conversations. And putting social media into strategic communication is like taking those garden conversations to global conversations, right? It's like putting a loudspeaker in the midst of these small community conversations and amplifying it. And what are the repercussions of that when life is no longer as simple as in the Gaulish village, right? When the world has become far more complex, and then you have the same kind of conversations that used to take place when the world was far more simpler and smaller. So having given that context, I want to go into some of the positive forces that have been unleashed. What exactly is strategic communication? Strategic communication is goal-directed, research insight-based communication that's aimed to cause some change, to persuade, to influence, to engage. And that's what social media is all about, right? It's less about technology and more about networks, connection, and ultimately about engagement. So in that sense, there's a perfect match. And so strategic communicators ought to be jumping up with joy that here is finally a tool where we can have finally what's called two-way communication or dialogue, which is what we have all been trying to do through our campaigns in strategic communication. So number one is dialogue and two-way communication, how social media enables that. Number two is targeting. Now with the rise of data analytics, a whole lot of behavioral targeting is now possible. Now your audience is not just vaguely based on demographic analysis. You get to know so much more about your audience that your key message, your slogans, your campaigns can be beautifully polished, beautifully targeted, and highly customized. So those to me are some of the positive forces that are unleashed. What are some of the negative? Number one is the same very dialogue, right? Dialogue is much easier said than done. Now you say we want to be two-way symmetrical communication, we want to be open to change, we want to hear, we want to listen, but are organizations ready for that kind of dialogue? Are they open to that amount of change? Because all said and done, it is about relinquishing control, right? I mean, there's a time when you find out all about your target audience and you have these beautiful messages, like, which are targeted and you want to change something. So there is this idea of control embedded in most strategic communication campaigns. But social media kind of opens up what Bakhtin called the heteroglossic world, right? Which is where there's a plurality of voices, where there's both centripetal and centrifugal forces happening at the same time, which, come to think of it, is a beautiful notion in strategic communication and public relations. And to be able to tap into that is wonderful, but also triggers a lot of tension and a lot of apprehension in organizations, because not easy to expose yourself and say, here we go, I'm open to all kinds of ideas and viewpoints. It's a pretty scary thought. So there's a shift from controlling the conversation to participating, to being just one voice among many. And that's not really very easy for most organizations to do. Secondly, so the first one was about dialogue, how it's easier said than done, and the second one is about transparency. All this leads to heightened levels of scrutiny and transparency. Because of social media, a lot of stakeholders expect transparency. And I was really fascinated by this idea called translucency instead of transparency, which actually Jude mentioned at a similar forum a couple of months ago on social media. Transparency might actually be a very extreme or polarized way of looking at communicating with organizations. Probably a way in between complete opaqueness and complete transparency might be translucency, right? The third one, again, translucency is not something that's easily achievable, right? The third one is immediacy. Social media opens up organizations to kind of 24/7 monitoring. In the Gaulish village, when you slept, the fishmonger slept. When you slept, the butcher slept, right? But now, while you are sleeping, your brand, your reputation, your relationships could be getting damaged somewhere. And that entails a level of immediacy which organizations really haven't seen till now, and entails a lot of almost 24/7 monitoring of the social media landscape. So to me, to sum up, overall, while there are a lot of positive forces and negative forces unleashed when social media enters the strategic communication sphere, overall it can definitely be a force multiplier, where there is a multiplication of positive and negative forces. If organizations can manage the onslaught of dialogue and to be able to relinquish control, if they ever had anyways, transparency or translucency, and the imperative of immediacy, and probably a return to a Gaulish village.
The concept of Tron is that there's a whole world inside your computer of networks, and that the power of the networks in the computer belongs to the user. And they use the term the user, and that user is the person behind the computer, not these fake people that live inside your computer. And this is the age that we're in now. Tron came out in the 1970s. I was a kid when this came out. But today, it is the power of the user. I like that analogy, that we are among... Is there a clicker over here? No? Okay. That we have the control of what happens on the computer side, but that control also spreads out, as Ganga was mentioning. It's spread out into the rest of this networked world that kind of quote-unquote exists in front of us on our computer. And so we have a marketplace of interactivity, but the whole focus of the marketplace is the user. And that's the fulcrum. So what I want to talk about is a couple of things. Let's look at what we believe social media to be. With the user in control, everything's going to favor the user, right? Well, maybe that's a utopian world, right? We now have all this power as consumers, stakeholders, as however you want to call us, individuals, customers. We now have the power to complain. We have the power to praise, right? And so, obviously, organizations are going to pander to our needs, right? Well, let's take a look at what, and this is this whole sense of engagement, being involved and participating. Let's see how companies are pandering to our needs. Like if you're excited to buy the Galaxy camera for someone special this holiday season. This was just done like a couple days ago. I was looking at some of the most recent posts I could find. Who's going to see the Twilight this week? Who would rather spend that money on fries and ultimate cheeseburgers? Follow Pepsi for a chance to win. Okay, and my favorite, Walmart. I don't know if you don't have Walmarts down here, do we? No. Family-friendly Christmas classics now at your local store. Like it if you're going to watch them over and over and over this year. The critical question is this really power to the user? No, obviously not, right? Oh, brilliant. Thank you. This 4 button, right? Okay. Oh. Maybe restart later? Okay. Is it going to keep coming every couple minutes? Because that's fun too. I hope not. Okay. All right, well, we'll see how it goes. But keep me awake. If you guys are all right, so this really is an engagement. This isn't the power to the user that we were thinking of. Another fun one, our great big Christmas sale is here. Like us, so because you like our sale. And yet we ask ourselves, why don't we have more perceived power? This is an engagement, just messaging, right? All we see organizations doing is transferring what they do in their ads, in their circulars, onto the online environment. This is not the social media I signed up for, okay? So we need to move, and then I'm talking from the kind of, when I say we, I'm talking in terms of practitioners. As communication practitioners, we should move from messaging to engaging. Messaging is unidirectional, and Ganga mentioned very aptly that the whole idea is symmetrical, two-way, right? Interaction. Right now we're still, even with Facebook and Twitter, it's still unidirectional. It's focused on awareness. Okay, we move that to involvement, right? The response, like us. What is that? What kind of click, like, right? That's not really participation. That's not the kind of involvement that an empowered user would have. Connection is the idea. We need to move from advertising to integrated communication. Integrated communication being kind of a form, which I'll talk about later, of strategic communication. And down here, which you can't see because they're too low. How do we go to there from here? Well, a few concepts of what engagement entails. And I'm going to spend the last few minutes talking about what engagement is. And from what my research has, I've spent the last year or so looking at engagement and what it means to be engaged as a user, as an individual, a consumer, a customer, however you want to define yourself. It's this spectator to participant notion. We're not simply reading the magazines. We are involved in this media experience. Okay, just in the same way that Tron, if you've seen the movie, the main person in Tron was actually in the experience. The user, there's a user down here. There's a user in there involved in that experience. Okay, engagement is informational, personal, social, and emotional. And I'm going to go through these really quickly because I don't want to take too much time. To be involved in this experience, we start off with this informational side. We connect on some kind of information. And a lot of people, the internet was what? The information superhighway. We moved from that superhighway to social media, but information is still a primary component of our online social media experience. Okay? Particularly, one thing that fascinates me is how information facilitates you as now a distributor of information. You become the internet, right? You're not just driving on the highway, you're building the highway yourself. Okay? Personal meaning with information, we don't just go with all the information in the book, we want to have stuff that relates to us, right? Relevant. We have in here things that are psychologically motivated. We look at our identity, what kind of person have we created for ourselves in the social media sphere, and particularly, for a lot of people, how do we make ourselves better? Not just talking about ourselves, what we ate today and the grade we got in a test or whatnot. Self-actualization, okay? Emotional attachment is another component of this experience. The engaged person. Think about when you are most involved, you're most interested in participating in something, whether it be an issue. I often ask students, what makes you really angry? Or what are you most passionate about? What is the thing that gets you most involved? Well, this emotional attachment. And this is a broad spectrum, but considering things that, that really excites you emotionally. A lot of these things are entertainment. People, you know, we talked about this yesterday, a fascinating discussion about how we're almost training ourselves to go be entertained, and how that connection develops. Okay, and then of course it wouldn't be social media without the social connection. Okay, you know, friend involvement, what are your friends doing? But on the broader appeal, some of these things are really important. We don't talk about enough. Crowdsourcing. And by crowdsourcing, I mean finding like-minded individuals through this weak tie connection between individuals. It's not that you're friends, it's that you have just a common interest. We never see each other. And another issue is social approval. And how the social approval, looking for people to confirm what you've done is valid, how it expands beyond your personal network of friends, literally people you relate with on a day-to-day basis in the real world. So, how do we do this? As companies, how do companies do this, or how do we understand this as an organizational entity or practitioners? Facilitate that information kind of development, distribution process with individuals, help people become who they really want to become, empower them, improve the experience they have with social media, and also do this kind of friend facilitation, how it is liking a company, connect somebody else with your friends. Like, oh, you like that, I don't know, that sports team. I don't, or I do. You know, how do you connect that when you put that on your Facebook page, for example, that all of a sudden you like the local sports team? Okay, how do we get there? And this is kind of where I want to end. Integrated communication. Now, you may say that integrated communication and strategic communication are the same thing. In fact, a lot of research shows that really Comm implies a level of integrated comm. By integrated, I mean this coordination among your various units within the organization. Okay, simple as that. For one purpose, though, and that purpose is to fulfill the needs of your stakeholders. Okay, it is a kind of upside-down, topsy-turvy model. Instead of the organization's needs, and we push them out, we're pulling in the interest of the stakeholders based on what they need from our organization. And how do we build that working together? Okay? I'm going to skip through a couple of these things here. The bottom line of integrated communication is this. If we're going to focus on the needs, and this is Jack Sparrow if you haven't seen Pirates of the Caribbean. And if you haven't seen this episode, I'm sorry for ruining it for you. This is what happens at the end. He does get eaten. The point of integrated communication and social media is that we no longer control, and this is what Ganga said, no longer control the outlets. We may want to control the outlets as practitioners, but we no longer have the control, and we should not be taking that control. So, a very common theme in media is this channel captain. Okay, you hire a top media executive or marketing, or maybe you got and you want your public relations or advertising agency to control what happens in the media. Well, that's not happening because you lose control automatically in the social media sphere. It's all about the I, interactivity, and the I as in you, well, the individual. Okay. The control over the social media distribution of messages really is going into the form of the user. Okay, and we can talk about things like being proactive and reactive, acting, but then listening. We can talk about how we monitor the ways that people connect, people converse. There is control, but it's not entirely managed. Okay, wrong button. Sorry, it's the right way. And this means a lot of adaptation. I want to show a couple, just show one quick thing. I like this quote from a study that I found a few years ago. The voice of the corporation cannot be considered anymore as a dominant message, but only as a component in a mosaic of communication activities. Okay? So this new era of integrated communication, strategic communication within the social media is about adaptation and flexibility. And working together with your stakeholder to build a better experience between the two of you. I want to show a quick example. We have volume.
Yes, we do.
Maybe you know this case. This is. If you actually know, I'm not sure if you all know this case. You all know it. Okay. No, you don't. Okay, well, I'll show it. Best Shop of the World campaign. This was done in Queensland, Australia. They were trying to. The Tourism Bureau of Queensland was trying to publicize this beautiful part of the world in Australia. instead of sending out a bunch of messages saying, come visit Australia, or some great tourism video, they decided to tap the power of the user. And you can tell there's this integrated component where the different functions, communication functions work together. This is only a couple minutes and then I'll be done. What? I don't know why it's doing that. Not very social media, right? Well, it starts here, and they tap different media outlets.
Are you looking for work? Well, you may want to consider moving to Australia.
Well, Australia's Tourism Bureau looking to fill what it is calling the best job in the world.
Still kind of traditional media approach. There's more to it.
Your new office. Hamilton Island, off the coast of Queensland, needs a caretaker.
Duties include feeding ocean fish, cleaning a pool, and collecting deliveries of mail.
It comes with a rent-free 3-bedroom villa with plunge pool.
All this and a salary of about $8,800 a month. As you might imagine, the regional director says response to the ad has been overwhelming.
Apart from being a very clever way to publicise an extremely beautiful part of Australia, I think what this position reflects is a desire to say to the world, look, this is a wonderful place to come and travel to.
And all you have to do is write a weekly blog.
That can't be right.
There's no catch. This is a real job.
I'll be very good at it.
You have to remember to feed the fish.
Video applications, including one for the Vatican. All applicants have to do is submit a 60-second video to this website, islandreefjob.com.
Hi, I'm John, and I'm a police officer in England, and you can tell by the silly hat.
I come from the ice tundra of the world.
It's really cold here in Connecticut, and I'd love to go to your paradise.
My dad was the great entertainer, Mr. Dean Martin.
Or do you think all we do is eat sausages and sauerkraut? Well, let me prove you wrong, because I'm definitely not one of them.
Yoo-hoo! Yoo-hoo! Here I am!
Here in the north of Sweden, the sea is covered with ice. So if you want to go snorkeling, you need an icebreaker.
So we're going to allow the public to vote for their favourite candidate. We'll pick another 10. We'll fly them across to Hamilton Island for a final interview, and then pick the successful candidate.
It's very tempting.
Sign up for that
That was a few years ago, but some of these responses are staggering.
They accepted me. I don't think so.
Australia.
Yeah, right.
Oh, man.
All right. The social aspect of this that really I wanted to where did my thing go? I'm sorry. The social aspect of this campaign that really got me was that they're building their brand. They're losing control, ceding that control to a certain extent. Because what was their whole campaign around? This website where everyone submitted their own videos. And they invited the public to come on and vote for the top candidate. This person would eventually become their sponsor. Okay, they didn't see complete control. As you heard, only one person do the public vote for. And they call and bring out 10 more on their own. However, they still did see to a certain extent some control in this, that as you go and you follow and you read these videos, you start getting an idea in your mind what this area stands for. And it became a very social phenomenon. This was a couple years ago, it's over. But the bottom line is this campaign kind of integrated the basic needs of their public to see this wonderful, beautiful place, to get a job in an economy that still is failing, but it also it used this whole social media focus to facilitate self-expression, a need in social media, and that's it. Thank you.
But what I wanted to also share with you, having been dealing with actual social media campaigns ourselves since 2007, is that you must remember one critical fact. A lot of these social media networks that are extremely popular today was created by a bunch of geeks who was trying to get popular with girls. They were not meant and built as a strategic communication platform. I don't think they actually imagined it to be as such as well. But there's a form of evolution that came about as a result of which they started off with a lot of contests, promotions, and when the brands suddenly realized that they could build branded-based communities in which they own the relationship with the consumers, I think that's where the ballgame starts to change. We're talking about communication on a very different front. They find that with branded communities, there's a new paradigm shift, okay, where in the past, when it's broadcast communication, you have to deal with a couple of, smooth up to a couple of very good editors and personalities, and they get the word out for you. And every time you try to reach out to the people, the marketing communication guys will have to pay a toll to the media owners who own the direct relationship to the consumers. But that has changed somewhat, where the relationship right now has been somewhat weakened, and a lot of them has been re-established, where the consumers are now surrounding brands themselves. With this direct relationship, what has also essentially changed is that the brands themselves now has a communication piece or channel. And I think a lot of the brands has realized that, and I think they're putting a lot of their investment, a significant part of the investment, into managing social media, or trying to understand it first. But everyone has a different take on it right now. So the reality is that the understanding of what social media really is still a huge spectrum. You've got those who think that they're going to buy a lot of advertising, forget about communication. That's why you see a lot of contests going on, and Walmart and all the rest of the culprits. You've got the other guys who is trying to be on social media because their head honcho, CEO somewhere, woke up and discovered that the entire family is on social media doing a dinner and had no choice. We should be on it. Why? We don't really know. We need to be there. So that's the other challenge that they have as well. And then the other group of them are a little bit more enlightened, has started to invest a lot of money and resources into building infrastructure that's ready for it. A lot of the companies out there, huge multinationals, are not ready for it. It's a lot of investment from trained expertise, getting real consultants to actually know what's going on and to be able to make use of that, to plan for things like crisis, and also to management tools, listening tools. Well, I was actually very surprised that when we were working with some of the established PR companies, global PR companies, that when it comes to social media listening, they still use a couple of poor interns to actually find information, rather than the technology which enables them to scale up in terms of being able to do it in real time. So even the industry, the practitioners themselves hadn't really caught up with all the things that's been going on as a whole. Now, we also know that whenever we deal with social media, the kind of words that's been used to describe social media is usually on the negative side. Things like viral, virus actually kills people. I don't know why they keep calling it viral. If for viral campaigns, we get briefs that, guys, we want a viral campaign. So we keep telling them that viral campaigns is a result, not the objective. We don't know why they keep asking us for a viral campaign. We've got those folks who keep telling us that, from viral, we've got things like addiction. I can't get off my Facebook. Everybody keeps checking on it. You've got things like crisis. Singapore has its own recently. Fiasco that even when our Prime Minister was visiting Australia, he has to respond to something which he didn't do. I don't think he realized what was happening. That happens to be made famous by the lady known as Amy Chong, for your reference. Right? You want to find that, you might want to find. She's quite famous. I think she's living and residing in Australia right now by her own choice. But yes. We gave her that choice and she left. We didn't force them out, though, whatever it is. Now, but that has somewhat changed as well in terms of what we can do in terms of strategic communication when it comes to social media. What we also realize is that it is not just about context, it is not just about engagement, although we still get a lot of that, but fundamentally there is something that hasn't really changed, and that is about human understanding or consumption of what exactly means by communication. It's two-way. Yes, you're right. They're still thinking of it as a broadcast medium. So that's why you see a lot of updates that's going on. It's promotional, it's tactical. And the other thing about them right now in the world out there is that the consumers are very aware that they have a voice and a say in how the brand is treating them. Too much promotion and tactical information, it is in the power of the consumer who's receiving all these things to shut it off. And these are things that has been happening, and it's actually very baffling, and it's scaring a lot of the marketers that we've met. And I think the good news is that a lot of the marketers themselves and brand owners are starting to commit to themselves time to learn more about it. So it's actually a very good time to start educating and running workshops for them. And also the fact that they are also beginning to put more resources into it as well. But there is a battle that's going on within this particular landscape for strategic communications, because when it comes to social media, there is one problem. We do not know who owns it within the company or the organization. There is a battle going on. Corporate communication says it's theirs. Marketing communication says it's theirs. Brand managers says it's theirs. And so far, from what we've seen, the battlefield, the marketing communications, which seems to be having the biggest budgets, is winning. Corporate communications have no say in it, unfortunately. So which means expect more coupons, discounts, and promotional offers coming on. But the good news is that thanks to a new bunch of us, which has actually ride the wave and grew, Blugrapes being one of them, being the pioneers of social media when they first started in 2007, was that the fact that we were able to influence them a lot. We're telling them that, look, you've got to be a lot more than just tactical information and just selling stuff as well. And we have been able to win quite a bit of advocates as well in this particular area, where we are convincing them that it is not the tactical information. We want to involve the consumers a lot more. It's not about the brand, it's about the consumers themselves, what your brand actually means to them, how does it help them, how does it make their life better. And social media just happens to be the technology that provides them a platform that if they share the same values as your company, give them an easy access to be able to share the information with their trusted networks. And that's what social media is supposed to do. Anything else, if you try to push too many promotions down the throat, it's just like those banks these days, cold calling you or asking you to sign up for a credit card. You detect it in 2 seconds and shut it off. Right now, I heard that the 2 seconds has dropped to about 2 milliseconds. Well, lastly but not least, I think just to close things off as well, when it comes to strategic communication, we've seen movement from contest, advertising, all the way down to conversations and engagement. But there is another fundamental shift that's starting to happen again. But it seems to be going in full cycle. The last one that is actually coming, and we are trying to invest some resources into studying it as well, is something very fundamental, and I think it's been taught a lot, but forgotten and not being applied in the social media space, and that's storytelling. If you look at the way things are, we consume stories like nobody. We love stories. That's why the television series are so popular. You've got Desperate Housewife all the way down to all the J.J. Abrams shows, Lost, how many seasons of it is just to see that at the end of the day they're all dead anyways. Like, we've got this kind of show, and we consume it, like tons of it. But the fact is there's a lot of things where it's subtly inserted into these stories as well, that tells us that, well, the brands are also just important and they are facilitators towards that goal. And the Koreans are masters at this, although they have not used the social media platform to do that just yet. Let me give you an example. I'm not sure how many of you actually watch Korean drama as much as I do, but yes, I do watch a lot of Korean drama. If you look at the storylines, they are very similar, just different actors with different, different cosmetic surgeons. What you have there is that Samsung, if you look at it as a global brand, has played it very well, and they've used something which was a trick that was started off by Procter & Gamble, which was soap opera. And if you notice that the certain soap opera came about is because they were trying to sell soap through telling drama. During a love story, which most Korean dramas are engaged in, you'll find that there's always the latest Samsung phone used by everyone. And they're always in very various scenes that they will zoom in on that Samsung phone to say I'm sorry with all the emoticons and features. To a loved one, to say I'm sorry, or to propose to someone who is about to fly off because of some patriarch who went against their relationship and stuff like this as well. But you'll always notice a couple of seconds where they actually zoom in on that, unnecessary zoom in, on that Samsung phone, and it's always the latest one, even though it is an auntie who happens to have no income, to be able to do all that functions which you will never realize at all. And the next time you walk into a store, you find that that product has a lot of emotional value tagged to it compared to every other phone that you see packed on the shelves. And if you find that appealing, you will actually consume it subconsciously as well, and without even realizing it. And you actually ask for more, because if you're a Korean drama fan, you watch even more of those. But subtly you find that whenever you see Samsung, you associate with the drama and then all the emotions and values that stuck with it as well. And we ask for it. No one watch advertisements more than 30 seconds. And yet we watch hours and hours and hours of Korean drama. And even for an American show right now. Movies, for example. Unfortunately, James Bond has to go for, I think, Carlsberg was a Heineken, I can't remember which one, but he should be doing Martini, right? Is it Heineken? Yeah, it's Heineken, right? Heineken. Oh my goodness, Bond with Heineken? I always think about Martini, but Heineken? Although he didn't drink it though. But they're trying to do that, okay? And I think social media is an avenue for involvement. And think about it as a, I'm not sure how many of you remember the Choose Your Own Adventures kind of a story. It was made popular during my school days. And it was so popular because you could determine the outcome. Now, if you were to put stories with the fact that as a consumer you are able to influence the outcome of it, you'll find that there is actually seems to be the next trend that's moving forward for social media in terms of how it's going to be consumed, where the brand don't fully lose control. They do have a storyline arc behind it already, pre-planned, but it's just that the more minuscule outcome is actually influenced or determined by the consumers themselves. So as a result, you find that there seems to be the next big thing that's coming on social media, next leap from just purely engagement, likes, shares. It's going to be that one, where people are more willing to share and consume social media in that space. And I think that's the promised land. But like it or not, if you think about it, storytelling isn't anything new. I mean, I just spoke to Mohan a couple of weeks ago and realized that that's actually an entire module that's actually being taught. But it's just not applied into social media just yet. So we are finding that in the next 6 months or so, hopefully Mark Zuckerberg doesn't wake up with some cool idea to do something else like all the way and breaks everything again. We would be seeing a lot more of that happening in the social media space. And I'm going to just end there. So I do not know how the world's going to be like. I can't see in a crystal ball. I can only look back with 2020 vision. But at least from what we've seen for some of the things and executions that's been done for a lot of the brands, that seems to be the direction that it's going to be heading towards for social media. For strategic communication. So that means you need to be able to tell great stories. Not just any story, but the brand's story or the product or services story out to the consumers for social media. Thank you.
I think, Ryan, the point you're making about moving from advertisements to engagement to storytelling is fascinating. And it makes sense. So I have a kind of follow-up thought for you on what you think. I know you can't see in your crystal ball because we don't have one, right? But when you were citing storytelling, you were talking about how brands weave their ways subtly into our stories. And so the soap operas that have, the certain kinds of brands. Do you think there's more to it than simply product placement in our own stories? Do you think there's the companies are moving towards helping develop the story, or I'd be interested in your feelings about that.
Well, I think if you look at businesses, businesses are profitable and growing because they serve a function. And if you ask why this business is popular or in service and it's consumed by somebody, it's here to serve a purpose. We need to know exactly why. Why are they here? What part do they play in the consumers' lives? And if we can answer that particular key question, then you find it's no longer just product placements. Take for example, Nike has been doing the same damn thing over and over again. They have the whole tagline that says "just do it," right? And I think I love it best when they actually hijacked the fact that you've got everything you need to be great. And they show one rather obese boy running along a long track. It didn't say buy Nike. I don't think you even got a 2-second shot of that Nike shoe because all you see is that big block coming in front of you, getting bigger. And that was it. And what they were trying to say is that they were trying to imply that Nike is will help you towards a particular goal, and that need is always still there. And if that need disappears, then the business serves no function. And as long as the business is still there, that need is still there. And I think there is many ways of telling the same story. The fact that they are partners in achieving that for you. So that's the function that they play. So it is beyond just pure product placement, right? I know it's a bit barbaric in the way Samsung just puts the phone and then they zoom in on the thing all the time. There are better ways. Like I said, they haven't employed it yet, but I think if they put their minds into it, they would do a fantastic thing. The best example that I've seen so far actually comes from China, surprisingly. One of the stories we heard about was actually a chewing gum. And the way they told the story was that they were telling different stages of a couple's life, how they met, how they went on a date, how they actually broke up, came back together again, got married, and all that. But throughout this entire thing, somehow, there was a chewing gum in there somehow, in every of that entire story. It's not just to show you the chewing gum, but somehow that entire scenario in which it was actually being played, that chewing gum somehow was there for some reason. But it wasn't out of place. There wasn't a blatant product shot. It was just that, you know, chewing gum is a part of your life, you know. Maybe just when you're thinking a lot, you chew a lot. No, maybe something that's they're thinking. But it's a very raw form of employing this thing, but they've been trying to do that. A more refined model that they were trying to do, I think, was actually Lenovo, which is the leading PC manufacturer in China. The one that they did was slightly different. They told us a very different story, another love story. You know, we Asians love love stories. Where the man told the lady that she was being a nuisance and broke up. And said that since you're online all the time, let's keep it online. We'll communicate online. And the entire thing was that the Lenovo notebook was the tool that allowed them to communicate virtually online. And as you go, the lady actually went through an episodic, every time you see her in every scenario, going for a job interview, losing her parents and stuff like this, the notebook was there and she was communicating with her loved one through the notebook. And when she finally got very frustrated, she actually went there and banged down the ex-boyfriend's door just to discover the notebook was still there, but with his death certificate next to the notebook. It's a bit morbid. But apparently he programmed the entire computer on the Lenovo notebook to keep sustaining her, giving her advice, even though when he's no longer around. It's a little bit of kind of tearjerker kind of thing. Okay, so you've got the kind of thing. It's not a blatant product placement, but you see that it's trying to show that it's a tool. It cannot be all the best of things. They didn't say anything like that. It says that we're here to help you so that you will always stay connected, even when things are a little bit less emotional. When computers are like Intel, there's always Intel inside. I don't know what it means, but it's there. The emotion that comes with it means that these are the tools that can facilitate relationships for you. And it means so much more than just another notebook, you know. And I think they've been reasonably successful for that.
I have a question. I find the storytelling through social media idea very fascinating also. I'm just wondering whether is there any examples that has been done, or do you envision how are you going to tell a story to what type of social media, which platform is there going to be integrated, and whether the story is told by the company and where other users are just engaging in talking about it, or other users are actually creating the story. Yeah. So are there any examples, or how do you envision?
There is one, but I think, well, like you said, this is something that's going to be in the future. You're not going to see a lot of examples like it's really well tested and stuff like this yet. It's very raw in its form. That's because we see certain markers starting to happen. We saw this in 2006, and that's why we went into social media. And this seems to be the same thing happening all over again. We see certain things, and back in 2007, when we were telling people Facebook is about social media, and trying to convince them that it's nothing to do with their face nor a book, it's the same challenge that we have right now. With that, there is an execution globally that you may want to try. It was an attempt, but it wasn't sustained. So it was campaign-centric, which was a pity. It could have been much more long-term, which was by, I think, X brand. you know, the perfume which is not sold here is a men's cologne, I think, which you as a user could decide what is the outcome of a comic. And they were showing, I think there was definitely a lot of you know, women in tight short skirts involved in the comic. Because they were targeting men, and the X brand has always been very men playful kind of a brand. So what they did was that they had a cliffhanger, and they'll ask the consumers, okay, tell us exactly how do you think the story will pan out. Submit your stories, and we'll open it up to a vote. And the one who is most popular will get chosen, that will then play out the outcome. But the person who submitted it will be drawn into the comic as well, and play out that role that you wrote the outcome to be. It's a very new way of involving consumers to dictate how the outcome of the story will be like. And if you think about it, that means they were able to play up a lot on sharing, getting people involved. It is about participation. The brand themselves will just put on guidelines, but they were not dictating how it's going to be like, but they were still somewhat in control because the one who drew the comic was the brand himself, not anyone else. So they had somewhat of brand control to some extent as well. It's a very raw form.
We're talking, all the three panelists, we talk about engagement. What do you think about the idea of co-creation? Because that's where I see engagement actually coming about. We actually have the consumer doing something. So it could be co-creation, sourcing for product ideal, or it could be co-creation in the ad themselves, like Coke has done.
Which Coke ad?
Coca-Cola. They've had a new campaign that said energizing Coca-Cola. And they've used a crowdsourcing platform, and they asked for entries to make this ad. At first they were afraid that it might be amateurish, but the advertisements came out so well that they're actually submitting some of it to the Cannes Lion. And that again has talks about, if consumers can do it, why do we need ad agencies anymore? Why don't we go straight to the consumers for them to come up with these ads? Sure. So Coke has done it, Lux, Unilever Lux has done it as well. Well, there are two issues. Of course, what is the relevance of industry professionals once you have people who can do it? And like the retailers have also done it, in which they come up with new flavors for their food, for their chips. And if you get consumers to actually come up with an idea or vote for which is the best flavored chip, then you get more buy-in at the end. So how do you see this about for the industry? Any comments on the idea of co-creation?
I think co-creation is a key concept in engagement. I think when an individual is engaged, emotionally, personally, socially connected, that they are more willing, and this hasn't been tested, but you can probably assume that this might be the case, they're more willing to co-create content. I think co-creation is a quality of an engaged individual. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think that ought to be the way that this new world opens up, and one of the prime opportunities for organizations, right? When all their stakeholders can start interacting with organizations in a two-way fashion. Co-creation would be kind of the ultimate in a way. Again, that implies a lot of relinquishing control, right? And as Ryan said, even though they are relinquishing control, they still hold on to it. So even in the storytelling process, which can be a co-creational process, there is still that element of control. Look, we are letting you mess around with this. We are letting you make it better or make you own it, right? But we still kind of hold the fulcrum kind of thing.
Well, I don't know. Well, maybe it's just me, but I'm not sure about joining the idea of storytelling and engagement or co-creation, because personally I find storytelling captivating, or as an audience I look at movies because I do not want to get involved. I would like the orator back in when stories were being told. I have a storyteller that actually just tell me the story, introduce me like Shakespeare, I will introduce the actors. It's purely within my control. As a reader, I do not want to get involved. The moment I got involved, the moment I know other people start meddling with the issue or story or stuff and so on, I just get disengaged. So storytelling and engagement, it might not necessarily come hand in hand in this aspect, especially in terms of social media. So that's why my question comes, how do you see storytelling being, engagement being, you know, captivating audience in lieu or vis-a-vis storytelling? I see like, that's from my...
But you're involved with it. And you're not putting, engagement doesn't presuppose it always that you put your personal life into it. But the aspect of, if you have to define engagement, what does engagement mean? Well, if it means an emotional attachment and a participation at some level, that doesn't have to mean that you're helping build it. But when you love a story, what's the first thing you do? You keep it to yourself.
Yeah, I'll just keep on reading it.
You keep reading it, and you get yourself into it. But when you see a really good, I like the TV show Sherlock on BBC, if you ever watched the show that's available here. I love that show, because the stories are captivating. And the first thing I do is I tell my wife, you gotta watch this with me, it's fantastic. And that is a level of engagement, because you immerse yourself so much, so you love it. I'm not going to go with my cell phone. I'm not going to say, hey, this is me. Okay, I did dress up as Sherlock for Halloween. Besides that, I did actually. But it isn't that you have to put your personal life into it. That's the nice thing about stories, is that it helps us get away from who we are.
Yes. Because you're going back to a lot of fundamental values of the human being. What exactly, like, hope, faith, love. If you have your brand somehow fits into that big picture of things. That's why you're in their lives in the first place, anyways. But you must remember one thing. I mean, Instagram became extremely popular because we live in an exhibitionist society. There are people who love to tell a story and love to be the one who tells it. Based on our statistics, we noticed that I think worldwide, you're talking about maybe a good 1 to 2% of people who would really actively get themselves involved. They would tell their friends, they would share, they would upload content, stuff like this. The rest of the guys are just consumers. Like you said, I don't want to be involved, I just want to see what's going on. And these guys are very happy creating it for you as well at the same time. So there's actually place for both of them. You're lucky that not 99% are creating, otherwise you have a big battle going on, but you've got 1% or 2% of them fighting, 91 to 98% of them just consuming that content. So they'll just chug along. I don't think they're disconnected, because you get a chance to actually vote out most of the time, to tell you what you like or what you don't like. And if the majority of the people like that particular track that is going on, you'll find that people are still very much engaged. They just to see what's happening next, out of curiosity. But I think I want to answer that question, because you're like asking me to justify my pay, right? Relevance of the professionals in the industry.
What's relevance, and the other one is, what do you think about this idea of co-creation, and do you see it?
Well, we think it's a great thing, and it's changing the landscape. I think even for product design, that's happened quite a bit. Just to share with you, one of our clients actually had an issue. Although the design wasn't here, but the feedback came from here. We are the agency for Frizzle milk powder, for maternity milk powder brand. And it was designed for Scandinavian countries, right? The lids and stuff like this. So it was a new, huge, nice design that came out. When it came out in the very humid countries like Malaysia, what happened was that the lid that they were actually opening and closing, once you open it, you couldn't close it tightly enough, and that attracted ants. And as a result, if you open up the tin, after using it for the first time, you'll find that you'll find leftovers of some ant parts in there. And even though much visibly, if you just take out the skim off whatever you can see, there's still that psychological effect that you think there's still something left in there, right? What happened next was that the brand didn't say that they shoved it and just strapped it underneath. They actually opened up and said, look, we heard your feedback, tell us what exactly is wrong with it, what do you think we can do about it as well. And they used this on two approaches. One was that they wanted numbers from the consumers to justify reporting back to headquarters that, look, your design is screwed. That these are the people tell us that, and this is the quantified number that people told us that. They were able to also source for some form of design that they said would be relevant for this part of the world as well, so that they can also take that design of the thing into consideration. Although they're not professionally done, but at least these were their at least it looks as if the brand cares enough to hear from you and ask you for your input. And you're not hiding anything, you are very transparent or translucent. That actually tells people, okay, I'm hearing you, I'm going to take action, and I'm going to take all this and send it back to headquarters. We know you are not the headquarters guy here. So they did that. And you find that the brand became a lot stronger with the consumers. They find that this brand can be trusted. They're a brand that listens, and they're willing to do something about it. Okay, so everybody has an input. Although the final design is still in the hands of the brand to decide how it looks like, it needs to be functional. And there's a lot of operational engineering and cost things that they have to consider. Now, about justifying my pay. I have to justify my pay, right? Every day we go down there, we tell our clients, we say, look, you've got to pay us this amount of money to get this. I think, yes, co-creation doesn't remove us from the equation because we are here still at the forefront. Most marketers, if you're talking about corporate communications and marketing communications, have enough on their hands. With the only exception of 1 or 2 companies like Dell, for example, they found that they needed so much help that they actually built an entire department and call it the Center of Excellence for Social Media. They got a social media listening command center in there. Lenovo did the same thing as well, where they hired an entire team. So that means, in other words, you need a bunch of people to can facilitate it, deploy it, manage it, and keep current with what's happening because thanks to, it's a pain in the industry, but it changes every 3 months. If you notice Facebook from where it was when it first started until now, it's changed so many times because this guy can't keep still. And it's a problem. But marketers themselves don't have the time, don't have the resource, and don't have the effort, sometimes not even the training enough to actually know what's going to happen and how to coordinate all these things together. And as a result, they actually rely on us to help facilitate that. We're not the creators. The agencies are not the creators most of the time these days. We are here to facilitate that, to help manage it, to deploy it, and for once in a while, choose which are the best partners to pull it off for them. So we still have a role to play. Hopefully that doesn't change too soon. For now, at least for the next couple of years, that seems to be the case for now. Hope that helps.
Any other questions, comments? I actually liked when Brian spoke about like and what does like really mean, and we were actually talking about it yesterday, day before, that you know, sometimes your friend just sends along something and says, like this organization. You may not even really know or like the organization, but just because someone has suggested it, you click on like. And what does it mean? In terms of measurement, a company gets to know that you have X number of people have liked you. And that's often taken as an evaluation objective, right? Criteria. But like does not always necessarily translate into real engagement, which is what strategic communication hopes to achieve. And that's something I really found fascinating in Brian's talk, and that was a main point he was trying to make also, that even now companies are going in a very unidirectional fashion and not really engaging, even though the tool is now available for true engagement. You know, whatever it is, whether it's fear of relinquishing control or whatever, that's kind of really holding them back and just stopping at superficial criteria like the number of likes, number of followers, and things like that.
You mentioned relinquishing control. I wonder if, in fact, that was ever the aim. I mean, is it about orchestrating control, orchestrating the voices? I mean, this language of participation, this language of engagement has this very positive glow about it. But what are corporations there for? But to actually be able to actually control. And I'm not sure it is about relinquishing at the end of the day. I mean,
whether they ever had any control whatsoever,
exactly.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, at least seen from within the organization's perspective, that seems to be what they aim to do, right? I mean, they do their audience analysis, they study the issue, they study the market, they study their target audience and get in all that information to create their very targeted, focused campaigns with clear-cut messages, seemingly giving them some sense of control over the problem at hand and what they're trying to solve, as though they have actually identified the crux of the issue and that all these research insights can help them to solve the problem. Seemingly, I fully agree. You know, it's probably just an aura of control that they feel or believe is there, which might not have even ever been there, right? Which just goes to say that you think, here is the message, here is a beautiful slogan, here is a beautiful campaign, now change. right? And that definitely doesn't mean that the stakeholders are just taking it and changing their behavior or attitude or awareness levels as the organization intends them to do. That was hardly ever the case, though organizations might have been lulled into thinking that through strategic communication, the word strategy or strategic itself implies that, right? That it's goal directed, that you know where you are and where you want to go. And this is the path to follow, and apparently you'll reach there. So that in itself implies a sense of control. But whether that was ever there at all is definitely a very valid point.
Yeah, but I guess what I was also trying to say is, I think that's part of the message. The message, the message that we are encouraging encouraging participation, that this is an open organization, our brands are open, it is yours, this ownership is all yours. It's part of it. It's part of the message they want to bring across. It's the ideology. I mean, that's my proposal.
Are you saying then that the control doesn't actually exist? That it's more manufactured, and it's more, the organization wants you to feel like you're in control so that you will participate more? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
I'd probably agree with you on that.
Yeah. One could even argue that it's actually a smarter form of exploitation of the consumer.
Well, the only time you actually get full control is an advertisement. You get to put exact, I mean, even then, it's within the boundaries of exactly how the specifications are like, how you want to position it, what you want to say. Beyond that, I think it's still, the key word is influence. I can't stress that enough. Right now, in the past, it's about influencing key mouthpieces like editors and key media, right? Right now, when it comes to social media, the thing exploded. You don't just influence one guy. You got to be the most charismatic guy on earth to be able to influence a whole bunch of people in a particular way. It sounds a little bit manipulative, but in effect, you are trying to be able to, so using your influence to guide thoughts, conversations. You can't dictate. The only time you can dictate, like you said, is still an advertisement. That's the only time you do. And advertisements are being neglected and filtered off automatically like nobody's business as well. The marketers themselves are not blind to that fact. They realize this. And I think they're trying to reconcile that. And it's an organization thinking that they need to change, because the marketers may know it, but the problem is that sometimes the managers on top, the management team, don't seem to get it either. And they're trying to reconcile. A lot of them are having their kind of internal battles right now, trying to understand it. And we're seeing a lot of organizations going into training and workshops and even reaching out to people to figure out, say, look, tell me exactly what have I missed. And one of the companies that actually did this on a very wide scale was actually a company like Robert Bosch. We always perceive this as the drill company, but they are actually an engineering company at its core. The kind of investment that they've done as an organization to understand whether they really understand what it means to be doing strategic communication was that they didn't just involve the corporate communication department, they actually involved the management team down, from all the vice president to the CEO of the Southeast Asian team. They actually involved the product managers, the brand managers, the corporate communication managers, the marketing communication managers, HR, the only guy, legal as well. And the only person who's not on the table was actually finance, for obvious reasons. So they involved everyone to synchronize the understanding of what it means. Like, look, the communication ownership is no longer just through these mediums. And in fact, every employee right now is actually a marketing machine. Every time something goes wrong, if an employee chooses to react, he or she is still representative of the company itself. And I think right now that's where the fundamental understanding is starting to shift. They are trying to reconcile this. Not everyone has been successful. And even to today, there are huge brands that still think that it is the responsibility of one department and not everyone else's. So ultimately, it's about influence. You need to be able to influence internally. The entire company needs to realize that they are all influencers at different levels of the business. And also when it comes to the consumers themselves, they need to be able to influence in a less direct manner, sort of like a left hook kind of thing. Not right in your face. It doesn't work these days.
Actually, to add to what Ryan is saying, it's finally all about the company creating a story or a message, message as a story, and releasing it into this, this media sphere, social media sphere, and that story just becoming one story amongst many, right? Consumers have their own experiences with brands and organizations, and they create their own stories. And social media kind of amplifies all that. So finally, even for someone who's not actively participating, he or she is exposed to a multiplicity of different stories and different voices, of which the company's voice, the organization's voice, is just one. So that to me is a very exciting place to be in, though it poses its own challenges. But I think it requires a shift in mindset to be able to see that you're no longer, if you ever were, when you draw stakeholder relationships, you draw the company in the center and then pull these lines to other stakeholders. But it's kind of no longer that. It's actually kind of a web of constituencies, and the company is one among these nodes, company or organization. And therefore, your story or your message is just one among many being created by a whole lot of other people.
I think the best storyteller is actually the American president. If you look at it, the way he uses and employs social media, think of him as a brand. He is, actually, by his own right. And what was the story that he was telling, right? Yes, you can. What the heck does that mean anyway, right? But it's a story. Not many people, well, there was sufficient majority of people who liked it enough that they voted him into office. But the fact is that he used that medium. He's got a basic story arc, as you call it. But he threw it out there and let people render it their version of it. You find that he encouraged them to do it, but as long as it stays somewhere within that arc that he's put down. So he's used a very easy, repeatable kind of routine that he's put down there, right? That yes, you can, and it's easily to remember. It's only like, what, 3 words long? It's very hard to forget. And he's encouraged all the way from the guys to make spoofs of it, to all the way to actually, artistic renditions of this, video renditions of this, and you find a lot of people like user-generated content, but still on story, on that just very simple idea that is a yes, you can empowerment. That as an individual, I'm here to facilitate that for you. It's not that he's lost control. He's still the most powerful guy on earth, but he's still done it in that manner, and he's the best example to use to actually watch him in that way. So, did you vote for him? That's a good question. Just kidding. I don't need to know. Well, when you're living in Singapore, it doesn't matter. Right? Everybody knows who you vote for. Anyway.
Let me say this: the politicians and storytelling, and the way that they manipulate stories is well known in the United States.
Yeah. They made it into an art, I assume.
It's a good word for it.
Actually, I think coming from CNM and with Ingrid here, I have to say something about publics who are not on social media, right? About people who are still very important stakeholders for strategic communicators, people whom they have to still reach out to, but a whole numbers of them are really not on social media yet and may not even get into that space, and therefore the need to continue with your basic principles of strategic communication as always, and the need to consider social media only as a really important tool that really taps into what strategic communication is all about, but nevertheless is still confined to X numbers of stakeholders. And this kind of kept coming up in my research on CSR communication as well, because a lot of companies out there who don't tap into social media because their stakeholders don't use social media, right? So they have a mix in their communication arsenal where they, which is it's not rocket science. It's just saying that it's really customized communication, right? That people who are on social media, we have started engaging with them, whereas there's a whole lot of people who are yet not there, but we still continue communicating with them using tools and channels that they are most comfortable with.
As part of the marketing mix and all.
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. We we still have 45 minutes, but if there are no more comments and questions, we can wind up. Yes? Okay. So probably just to kind of summarize, I would just like to, Brian, would you like to just kind of wind up what you presented, and maybe Ryan, you could just wind up what you presented.
Sure. I think when if we're looking at ourselves as whether we're looking at ourselves as users or practitioners in the social media sphere, that I think that the main point is what constitutes our own engagement as users, or what constitutes a user's engagement if you're a practitioner. What does it mean, and what kind of power or influence do we have as either practitioners or influencers? I think what we're seeing here as we're talking is, where does control really lie? Is control real? And what does it mean in this emerging relationship between the organization and the individual? And does social media facilitate more control for an individual as they're engaged and involved in an issue, or does it mean that the organization has more access to what the individual is doing and is going to, as Ingrid pointed out justly, is going to exploit that use of social media? I hate to end with a question, but that's the question that I think we need to look at as going forward.
Well, I'm just going to leave one thought with you, because I'll be very upfront. I'm a student of social media myself still. I can't profess that I've known any, we just started on that journey anyways. But there's one thing that we do need a lot of help in, and that's storytelling. And to be able to arm the next generation of marketers and strategic communication people out in the market today with the sufficient and the right tools and the skills to be able to facilitate that. Otherwise, we'll be just receiving spams and coupons for the rest of our lives. And it's a real thing. We need a lot of help, and we can only be done in partnership and never in silos. We've been going around talking to a lot of tertiary institutions as much as we can, asking for this help. That we please train the next generation of practitioners to be a little bit more better at storytelling, to be better in terms of understanding, a little bit more depth in terms of understanding communication, and remember that social media is just a technology and a platform. Fundamentally, do not lose sight of the fact that communication still boils down to the fundamentals, and not just be swept away by all the euphoria that's been going on, all the hype that's been going on, thanks to a lot of the media that's been touting that that's going to change the world, and Facebook equals social media kind of a crap that's gone out there in the market. Yeah, I think that sort of ends.
Yeah, and I must say that we are creating graduates who understand storytelling and who understand that social media is just a tool. So we do keep them grounded in principles of communication management, and I'm just happy to tell you that. So for me, finally, it is a force multiplier, as a term that has been bandied about in the last couple of days. Unleashing forces which are kind of tapping on this notion of control, as we discussed, whether it's control or participation or co-creation or storytelling. It is indeed a force multiplier, a multiplier of both positive and negative forces. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.